Today we're going to be having a look at a story given to us by a non-Catholic, in fact. And it's from the book Padre Pio, The True Story by Bernard Ruffin. We can see from this the prestige, the influence that Padre Pio had, even among non-Catholics. And it's quite impressive. Hello friends and followers. On this channel, Great Saints, we seek out inspiration from Padre Pio himself and beyond to the lives of other great saints. So do join us in this apostolate. A little while back, Bernard Ruffin was interviewed by Father Groeschel, who's a well-known Franciscan of the Renewal. This was on EWTN, and you can see some of the footage. So this is the person who we're going to be quoting today.
Good. And you've been on our broadcast before, yes.
Yes, I have.
And what about, well, first of all, how did you get to be involved with Padre Pio?
I first heard about Padre Pio when I was in college.
Now, Bernard Ruffin's stories about Padre Pio are interesting, as we said, and he describes himself as a Christian, but not actually as a Catholic. So interesting from that perspective. He first encountered Padre Pio in 1968 through a book that he read. He never actually met Padre Pio. And so after that, he started studying Padre Pio. And this book of his is the works of a lifetime literally. It took him 3 decades before he set about writing about Padre Pio. And he said that in 2018. He tells us that there was a survey of religion conducted in 2005, and in that 70% of Italians claim they invoke the saints. They ask for the intercession and the prayers of the saints. 31% said they invoked Padre Pio. 9%, that is one third less, say they invoke the Virgin Mary. And yet Padre Pio never left the monastery in which he lived, Our Lady of Graces, which is high up on a hillside near the big town Foggia. He tells us as well that for many years, throngs of people used to wait in the pre-dawn darkness. Now it gets pretty cold up there, snow lying around, sometimes icy cold. They were waiting there to attend Padre Pio's Mass. He tells us as well that Padre Pio carried the wounds of Christ's crucifixion on his hands, on his feet, in his side for 50 years. And that people used to wait days, even weeks, in order to have their confession heard by Padre Pio. He tells us as well that people came from all over Italy to see Padre Pio, and after the war, the Second World War, they used to now come from further afield, from around the world to meet Padre Pio. And yet, Padre Pio only spoke Italian and his local Italian dialect, nothing else. And yet he could communicate somehow effectively with these people in his confession. So somehow either the angels did the interpreting for him, or he had the gift of tongues, but people could understand Padre Pio. They didn't speak the same language. He tells us as well that the majority of people that visited Padre Pio, they certainly were Catholics, but not all of them. He said Protestants used to visit Padre Pio. Jews used to visit Padre Pio to seek his advice. Even atheists would seek the advice of Padre Pio. And he was sought out by all levels, all strata of society. He was sought out by everyone from the uneducated working peasants, the farmers in the area. Intellectuals used to visit him as well. Artists, singers, politicians, plus bishops. And even the Prime Minister of Italy, for a long time, he was Aldo Moro. He used to make frequent trips to Padre Pio to visit what he called the light of Gargano. So imagine that the country was influenced by Padre Pio. And he is also credited, Bernard Ruffin tells us, with changing the life of that region in Italy, because that area around Gargano had been impoverished, severely impoverished for centuries. But Padre Pio established the hospital there, the famous hospital Casa Solevia della Sofferenza, the house for the relief of suffering. And through that, he brought prosperity to the area, he brought employment to the area, education, and a first-class health system to the area. He tells us there was one Andre Madato, who was from New Jersey. I presume that's the New Jersey in the United States. And he visited Padre Pio to make his confession, just out of curiosity. He said, I was awestruck. Padre Pio knew what I had been debating in my mind, the thoughts going through his mind, the debates going on, and he correctly recited to me all of my sins. The impact, the effect of this on him was, after confession, all he could do was just cry and cry. Because Padre Pio made it possible for me to ask forgiveness from God with all of my heart. But another significant thing is there were these trends in those days in theology to demythologize the Gospels. In other words, to strip them of any uncomfortable baggage. It is impossible in this time of the electric light bulb and modern medical discoveries to at the same time believe in the New Testament world of demons and spirits. And yet, Padre Pio convinced so many people that indeed the Gospels were true. What was written there was literally true. And these were reasonable people. They were intelligent people. He convinced these people that he saw Our Lady, had conversations with Our Lady, with his guardian angel, with other people's guardian angels, that he cast out demons and that he was also attacked by demons. And so people became convinced that Padre Pio, that he was like Moses. The Lord used to speak to him face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. And Bernard Ruffin tells us that there is overwhelming testimony that Padre Pio was gifted with. He had intimate knowledge of the inner lives of people who visited him. Without leaving his monastery, he was seen in other parts of Italy and the world. He communicated to people the reality of Christ on Calvary during Mass. Then Bernard Ruffin would like to bring attention to Padre Pio's cherished words. I shall be able to do much more for you when I am in heaven than I can do now while I'm on earth. And there are many, many reports of great favors still being received today. This is years after his death. So Bernard Ruffin gives the entire spectrum. People really in favor of him, people really against him. And for 30 years he studied Padre Pio. And concludes, you can come to one of four conclusions. But Bernard Ruffin defends this one, that it's more reasonable to say that Padre Pio is what he appeared to be, one of the most significant figures in Christian history, of prophetic and apostolic nature, with great personal holiness and wisdom, and whose spiritual gifts tended to confirm the truths of the gospel in an age which was largely indifferent and unbelieving. And Bernard Ruffin concludes that Padre Pio had no rivals. He is the saint most frequently invoked. We do encourage you to join us on this apostolate about the great saints. And to start with, make sure that you are subscribed to our channel, that you have clicked that reminder bell. Feel free to leave comments. You can leave your prayer requests in the comments. And we're having masses from now on said for all of those who are following our channel, who are following Padre Pio.